The doctor asked if I was donating my kidney voluntarily. My mother answered before I could. That's when I realized this surgery wasn't about saving my sister. It was about a role my family had decided for me long before I had a choice. 7 days before the operation, I found out why. The room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee, the kind that's been sitting on a warmer too long. I noticed that before I noticed the forms. They were stacked neatly in front of me, clipped together, thick enough to feel heavy even before I touched them. Across the table, my mother sat perfectly upright, hands folded, calm in the way people get when they've already decided the outcome. My father leaned back slightly, arms crossed. He didn't look at the papers. He looked at me. My sister Sophie sat close enough that our knees almost touched. Her hand rested lightly on my arm like a reminder of where I belonged. The doctor cleared his throat. "Before we go any further," he said, "I need to ask you something." He looked directly at me, not at my parents, not at Sophie, at me. "Are you doing this voluntarily?" The word hung there. Voluntarily, it sounded formal, clean, like it belonged on paper, not in a room like this. No one spoke. My mother smiled first. It was a small smile, practiced, the kind she used in grocery stores and church hallways. "She's just overwhelmed," she said. "It's a lot to take in." My father nodded once, slow and final. Sophie squeezed my arm just a little, not enough to hurt, enough to ground me. I realized then that everyone was waiting for me to do what I always did. Agree, nod, move things forward. I looked down at the papers. Most of the information was already filled out. My name, my date of birth, my insurance details, nothing was signed. Just waiting. "Yes," I said. It came out quietly. Not strong, not weak, just familiar. The doctor held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then he nodded and slid the stack a little closer to me. "Take your time," he said. But no one else acted like I had time. On the drive home, my mother talked about logistics, time off work, meals, recovery. My father mentioned parking passes and insurance approvals. Sophie stared out the window, her reflection pale against the glass. No one asked how I felt. That night, I lay awake in my childhood basement staring at the low ceiling. The pipes ran across it like veins, exposed and humming softly. I'd slept down there since Sophie got sick the first time, years ago. It made sense back then. She needed the quiet, the space, the upstairs bedroom closer to the bathroom. I told myself it was temporary. Temporary has a way of stretching. I thought about the doctor's question again. "Are you doing this voluntarily?" I tried to remember the first time I learned what that word meant. When I was a kid, volunteering wasn't something you decided. It was something you were. The good daughter, the easy one, the one who understood. If Sophie needed something, I gave it. If my parents were tired, I didn't ask. If there was tension in the room, I learned how to dissolve it by disappearing. I was praised for that. Emily's so mature. She never makes a fuss. She's strong. Strong was never a compliment. It was an expectation. The next morning, my mother reminded me to eat light. Less salt, more water. She'd been saying that for as long as I could remember. "Your body needs to stay healthy," she said, passing me a bowl of oatmeal. "You know that." I did know that. I'd always known that. At work, I tried to focus on my screen, insurance codes, billing adjustments, numbers lining up the way they were supposed to. Still, my mind kept drifting back to the consultation room, to the way the doctor had looked at me. Not accusing, not kind, just careful. That afternoon, I got a call from the hospital. A nurse confirmed my next blood draw. Routine, she said, just to make sure everything lined up. Everything. I hung up and sat there for a long moment, phone still in my hand. A strange thought crept in, uninvited and unwelcome. What if something didn't? I pushed it away. Families didn't fall apart over paperwork. Lives didn't unravel because of forms and tests and quiet questions. That only happened in stories, not in neat houses on quiet streets, not in families like ours. That evening, my mother set out folders on the dining table, medical records, appointment schedules. She moved through them with efficiency, like she'd done this before. "We'll get through this," she said. "We always do." I nodded because that was my role, because nodding was easier than asking what "through" really meant. As I went back down to the basement, I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. A box tucked behind the old filing cabinet. My name written on the side in my mother's handwriting. Just my first name. Emily. I stood there for a second, my hand hovering over the lid. Then I told myself not to be dramatic. I went to bed instead. Upstairs, I heard Sophie coughing. My mother murmured to her, soothing, soft. The sounds drifted down through the vents. I stared at the ceiling again, listening to the house breathe around me. Strong people don't ask questions. They don't hesitate. They don't open boxes better left closed. At least, that's what I'd been taught, and I believed it, for now. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding, trimmed lawn, a porch light that clicked on automatically at dusk. From the outside, it was the kind of place people described as peaceful. Inside, everything followed a rhythm I'd learned long before I could name it. Sophie's room was upstairs, closest to the bathroom. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and medication. A humidifier hummed day and night. Her door stayed open like an invitation no one needed to knock for. My room was downstairs. Calling it a room was generous. It was a finished basement corner with a low ceiling and one narrow window at ground level. In the winter, it stayed cold. In the summer, it never quite warmed up. I moved down there the first time Sophie got sick. I was 9, she was 6. "It'll just be for a while," my mother had said, already carrying my things down the stairs. "She needs more space right now." I believed her. At 9, I believed everything. Growing up, I learned how to be quiet without being told. I learned how to step back when adults leaned forward. I learned how to read the room before I read books. When Sophie needed rest, I played outside. When Sophie needed calm, I learned to whisper. When Sophie needed attention, I learned how not to. At dinner, her plate always came first. Smaller portions for her, carefully measured. Mine came later. No restrictions, no special rules. Except there were rules. I wasn't supposed to drink soda, too much sugar. I wasn't supposed to eat salty snacks. Not good for me. I wasn't supposed to stay up late. My body needed consistency. My parents said it like they were protecting me. "Your health matters," my mother would say. "You need to take care of yourself." I took care of myself the way they taught me to, by never needing care. In family photos, Sophie stood in the middle. My parents' hands rested on her shoulders, light but possessive. I stood to the side, smiling wide enough to show I was happy to be there. People used to comment on it. "She's so independent," they'd say, nodding toward me. "She's strong." Strong again. In high school, Sophie stopped playing sports. Her doctors advised rest. I'd already quit without anyone asking. Soccer practices ran late. Games conflicted with appointments. It was easier to step out than to rearrange everything. I told myself I didn't miss it. By 16, I had a part-time job. Grocery store, evenings, and weekends. The money went into a shared account. I didn't ask where it went. I didn't need to. College was the same story. I stayed close. Community college first, then a local transfer. Sophie needed stability. My parents needed help. I learned early that wanting more felt like taking something away from her. That night, after the hospital visit, I stood at the top of the basement stairs and listened to the house. My mother moved softly upstairs, checking on Sophie. My father watched television, volume low. Everything sounded normal. Too normal. I went back down and sat on the edge of my bed. The box I'd noticed earlier stayed tucked behind the filing cabinet just out of sight. I tried to remember when I'd last seen it opened. I couldn't. The next morning, my mother reminded me again about my diet. "Low sodium," she said, handing me a list. "The nurse mentioned it helps." It always helped. Everything I did helped someone else. At work, I caught my reflection in the darkened screen of my computer monitor. I looked tired, not sick, just thin around the edges, like a person who'd learned how to take up less space over time. That afternoon, I got another call from the hospital. Same nurse, same calm voice. They needed a more detailed family medical history. Just routine, she said. We want to be thorough. Thorough was a word my parents liked too. That evening at dinner, I asked my mother a question I'd never asked before. Do you remember when I first moved downstairs? She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. Of course, she said. That was when Sophie needed more care. I was 9, I said. Yes, she replied, a little sharper now. Why? I shrugged, just trying to remember how long it's been. My father looked at me then, really looked at me. Why does that matter now? He asked. I shook my head. It doesn't. And that was true. It didn't matter. Not yet. Later that night, I lay awake again, listening to the pipes hum overhead. The house felt smaller than it used to, or maybe I was finally noticing the walls. Strong people don't keep score. They don't question patterns. They don't wonder why some sacrifices are permanent and others are temporary. I closed my eyes and told myself to sleep. There were tests to do, paperwork to finish, things to get through. I didn't know yet that the life I thought I understood had been carefully arranged long before I ever had a choice, but something inside me had started paying attention. And once you notice a pattern, it's hard to unsee it. The lab was colder than the rest of the hospital. Not painfully cold, just enough to keep you aware of your own skin. I sat in the chair with my sleeve rolled up, watching the phlebotomist prepare the needle. She was efficient, gentle, the kind of person who did this all day and never made it feel dramatic. Just a few more vials, she said. Routine follow-up. Routine again. I nodded and looked away as the needle slid in. I'd done this before, countless times. Blood draws had been part of my life for so long that they barely registered as events. Still, I noticed the labels this time. My name, a long barcode, abbreviations I didn't fully recognize. When she finished, she pressed gauze to my arm and taped it down. All set, she said. Someone will be in touch if we need anything else. If. I stepped back into the hallway, the smell of disinfectant following me. The corridor stretched out in both directions, identical doors lining the walls. People passed me without looking up. Doctors, nurses, families moving in tight clusters. I stood there longer than necessary, unsure where to go next. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Did it go smoothly? I typed yes and sent it before thinking too much about whether that was true. On the way home, my arm ached slightly where the needle had been. A dull, familiar sensation. I'd always thought of my body as reliable, cooperative, something I could depend on to do what was asked of it. That afternoon, I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept drifting. The nurse's tone, the extra vials, the word thorough. I told myself I was imagining things. The call came the next morning. It was early enough that I was still in bed when my phone rang, an unfamiliar number, hospital prefix. Emily Carter? A woman asked when I answered. Yes. This is Rebecca from the transplant team. We just wanted to clarify a few details from your medical history. Her voice was neutral, professional. Of course, I said, sitting up. She asked about allergies, past surgeries, any known genetic conditions in my family. I answered automatically. I'd done this before. Then she paused. Do you know of any history of kidney disease beyond your sister? She asked. No, I said. Just Sophie. Another pause. Longer this time. And your parents? Any known genetic disorders on either side? Not that I'm aware of. There was a faint clicking sound, like a keyboard. Okay, she said. One more thing. Were you adopted by any chance? The question landed without warning. I stopped. No, not that I know of. Oh, she said quickly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to assume. Sometimes we see variations in family histories and we just like to be thorough. There it was again. That's all for now, she continued. Thank you for your time. The call ended. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart beating faster than it should have been. The room felt too quiet, too still, adopted. No one had ever said that word to me before, not in relation to myself. I laughed once, softly, like the idea was absurd. Of course I wasn't adopted. I looked like my parents. Sort of, didn't I? I went upstairs and poured myself a glass of water, hands unsteady. My mother was already awake, moving through the kitchen. "Everything okay?" she asked without turning around. "Yes," I said too quickly. She glanced at me, her eyes sharp for just a second. "Your appointment went fine?" "Yes." She nodded and went back to what she was doing. I watched her for a moment, the familiar slope of her shoulders, the way she moved like everything was under control. She'd raised me, loved me, provided for me. That meant something, didn't it? Later that day, I received an email from the hospital, a follow-up appointment scheduled, in person, no explanation, just a time and a room number. I forwarded it to my mother. She replied almost immediately, "We'll go together." The word "we" tightened something in my chest. That evening, Sophie asked me how I was feeling. She said it lightly, like a casual check-in. "Fine," I told her. She smiled, relieved, and went back to her phone. I wondered then if she'd ever had to answer questions she didn't understand, if anyone had ever looked at her medical history and hesitated. That night, I dreamed about paperwork. Endless forms, my name typed over and over, each time slightly different. Emily. Emilia. A blank line where a last name should be. I woke before my alarm, heart racing. On my way out the door, my eyes drifted again to the box behind the filing cabinet. I crouched down this time just for a second and brushed the dust off the top. My name stared back at me. No last name, just Emily. I straightened up, pulse loud in my ears. Whatever the hospital wanted to clarify, I had a feeling it wasn't small, not routine, not something that could be smoothed over with calm voices and practiced smiles. Something didn't match, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted it to. I stayed late at work that night, long after the office had emptied. The overhead lights buzzed softly and the cleaning crew moved down the hallway, their carts rattling in a steady rhythm. I told myself I was catching up. In truth, I didn't want to go home. When the building finally went quiet, I opened my laptop and logged into my insurance portal. I'd accessed it hundreds of times before, helping patients fix billing errors, track claims, untangle small bureaucratic knots. This time, I was looking at my own name, Emily Carter. Everything looked normal at first. Active coverage, primary care physician, emergency contact. Then I clicked deeper. Beneficiaries, authorizations, linked profiles. Sophie's name appeared more than once. I stared at the screen, rereading the lines as if they might rearrange themselves. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even unusual, just specific. There was a medical power of attorney listed, signed years ago. I remembered that day vaguely. I'd been 22. My mother had brought the papers home in a neat folder. "Just in case," she'd said. "These things are important." I hadn't argued. I rarely did. The timestamp glowed at the bottom of the document. My signature sat there, clean and unquestioned. I closed the tab and opened another. Old records, archived files, anything with my name on it. Most of it was boring. Vaccinations, physicals, routine labs. But one file made me stop. Birth records. The page took longer to load than the others. When it did, something felt wrong immediately. My date of birth was there, the hospital name. But where the mother's signature should have been, there was a blank line. No explanation, no note, just absence. I leaned back in my chair, the plastic creaking under my weight. My heart thudded in my ears, loud enough that I wondered if anyone could hear it. This didn't mean anything, I told myself. Records get misplaced, forms get scanned wrong, systems change. Still, I couldn't stop looking. I checked Sophie's records next. Hers were complete. Signatures, notes, margins filled with careful handwriting that had been preserved digitally. The contrast was impossible to ignore. I shut my laptop and rubbed my face, suddenly exhausted. I thought about the box in the basement, the one with my name on it. Just my name. When I got home, the house was dark except for the kitchen light. My mother sat at the table sorting papers into piles. She looked up when I came in. "You're late," she said, not accusing, observant. "Work ran long." She nodded and slid one of the folders aside. "We're almost done organizing everything. It helps to stay ahead of it." Ahead of what, I wondered. I went downstairs without saying more. The basement felt colder than usual, the air heavier. I stood in front of the filing cabinet for a long moment before pulling the box out. It wasn't locked. Inside were documents folded and refolded so many times the creases had softened. Old envelopes, copies of forms, things that didn't belong together but had been kept anyway. I picked up the first paper, a hospital intake form, my name, my birth date. No parent listed. Another document, legal language, words like placement and temporary guardianship, dates from before I could remember. My hands started to shake. I didn't read everything. Not yet. I didn't need to. Footsteps sounded overhead. I froze, listening. My mother moved across the kitchen, then up the stairs. Sophie's door opened, soft voices, comforting murmurs. I slid the papers back into the box and pushed it into place. Some truths were too sharp to hold all at once. The next day, the hospital appointment came. My mother insisted on driving. The ride was quiet, the kind of silence that pretends to be peaceful but feels brittle underneath. At the hospital, a nurse led me down a hallway I hadn't been in before. Fewer windows, thicker doors. A man waited inside the room, middle-aged, calm. No white coat. "Emily," he said, standing. "I'm Dr. Harris." He didn't ask my parents to leave, but when he spoke to me. "We've reviewed your recent tests," he said. "There are some inconsistencies we need to clarify before we can move forward." My mother leaned in. "What kind of inconsistencies?" He glanced at her, then back at me. "Medical ones," he said evenly. "Nothing urgent, but important." I felt something settle in my chest, then heavy, certain. This wasn't about paperwork. This was about me. Dr. Harris closed the door gently behind us, not to shut anyone out, but to quiet the room. The sound clicked softly, final in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Before we talk about next steps," he said, "I need to speak with Emily alone for a few minutes." My mother straightened. "Is that necessary?" He nodded. "It's part of the process." There was a pause. My father looked at me, his expression unreadable. Sophie kept her eyes on the floor. "It won't take long," Dr. Harris added. My mother smiled again, that same practiced smile. "Of course," she said. "We'll be right outside." They left together. The door closed. The room felt instantly larger and unbearably quiet. Dr. Harris didn't sit down right away. He stood across from me, hands loosely clasped, like he was choosing his words carefully. "I want to be very clear," he said. "Nothing we discuss here means anyone has done something wrong. My role is to make sure you understand your position fully." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what that position was anymore. He pulled a folder from the table and opened it, turning it slightly so I could see. Charts, numbers, lines I didn't fully understand. "Based on your blood work and genetic markers," he said, "there are inconsistencies between your profile and what we'd expect for a biological sibling." The words were calm, measured. They landed anyway. "Inconsistencies?" I repeated. "Yes," he said. "It doesn't mean you can't be a donor, but it does mean we need to clarify some things before proceeding." I stared at the folder, my vision blurring slightly around the edges. "So, what does that mean?" "It means," he said gently, "that there may be factors in your medical history that haven't been fully explained to you." I swallowed. "Like what?" He met my eyes. "Like whether you're being pressured." The word hit harder than I expected. "I'm not," I said automatically. "No one's forcing me." "I didn't say forcing," he replied. "Pressure can be subtle. Family expectations, emotional obligations, financial dependence." Each word felt uncomfortably accurate. "I'm required to ask," he continued, "and you're allowed to answer honestly." I laughed softly, a sound that surprised both of us. "I don't know how to answer that," I said. He nodded, as if that made sense. "There's something else you should know," he said. "You have the right to say no, at any point, for any reason, and you don't owe anyone an explanation." The room felt too small all of a sudden. No, I'd never imagined that word applying to me in this context. Not here, not now. "What happens if I do?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "The process stops. We document your decision. That's it. And my family? That's not part of the medical decision," he said. I looked down at my hands. They were clenched tightly in my lap. "There are additional steps we can take," he added, "including reviewing certain records if you want clarity." "What kind of records?" "Early medical documentation," he said. "Birth-related, guardianship, anything that might explain the inconsistencies." My heart began to pound. "You're saying there's something I don't know," I said. "I'm saying," he replied carefully, "that there may be information you weren't given." The door opened before I could say anything else. My mother stepped back in, her expression bright and concerned in equal measure. "Is everything okay?" Dr. Harris closed the folder. "We're still evaluating," he said. "There are some details we need to verify before we move forward." My father's jaw tightened. "We've already been through all of this." "I understand," Dr. Harris said, "but my responsibility is to the donor." My mother turned to me. "Emily?" I felt all of them looking at me then, waiting, expecting. "I just need some time," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, like a foreign language. My mother hesitated. "Just for a second." Then she nodded. "Of course," she said. "Take whatever time you need." But her eyes said something else. They said, "Don't complicate this." On the way out, Sophie brushed past me. Her hand grazed mine. She didn't look up. In the car, no one spoke. The silence pressed in from all sides. At home, my mother went straight to the kitchen. My father disappeared into the living room. Sophie went upstairs without a word. I stood there alone in the hallway, the doctor's words echoing in my head. "You have the right to say no." I'd spent my entire life believing my value came from saying yes, from being reliable, predictable, easy. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The pipes hummed softly, steady and indifferent. I thought about records, about blank lines and missing signatures, about a box in the basement I hadn't fully opened. For the first time, I didn't push the thoughts away. I let them stay. And somewhere between the hum of the house and the weight in my chest, I realized something had shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough that I knew there was no going back to who I'd been before. The meeting was scheduled for the next afternoon. Same hospital, same floor, a different room. This one was larger, with a long table and too many chairs. A pitcher of water sat in the center, untouched. The blinds were half closed, letting in strips of pale light that cut across the surface like lines you weren't supposed to cross. My parents arrived early. They always did. Prepared, composed, ready. Sophie sat between them, wrapped in a cardigan that looked too big for her. She kept her hands folded in her lap, eyes down, the picture of fragility everyone expected her to be. I took the chair across from them. Dr. Harris entered last. He nodded to all of us and sat at the head of the table. No clipboard this time, no stack of forms, just him. "I want to reiterate," he began, "that today's discussion is about clarity, not blame." My mother smiled politely. "We understand." Dr. Harris turned slightly toward me. "Emily, how are you feeling today?" The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me that since this started. "I'm okay," I said. My father cleared his throat. "We'd like to move forward as soon as possible," he said. "Sophie's condition is deteriorating." "That's true," Dr. Harris said calmly, "and that's exactly why we need to be thorough." My mother leaned forward. "We've provided every record we have." Dr. Harris nodded. "You've provided what you have access to." The room went still. "What does that mean?" my father asked. "It means, Doctor," Harris said evenly, "that there are gaps in Emily's early medical history that need explanation." My mother laughed lightly. "Everyone has gaps. Records get lost." "That happens," he agreed, "but combined with the inconsistencies in genetic markers, it raises questions." Sophie shifted in her seat. My father's voice hardened. "Emily is her sister. That's what matters." Dr. Harris met his gaze. "Biology matters in this context." I felt all eyes move to me again, like a spotlight I'd never asked for. "Are you saying she can't donate?" my mother asked. "I'm saying we can't proceed until Emily feels fully informed and free of pressure," he replied. My mother turned to me then. "Do you feel pressured?" The question wasn't curious. It was corrective. I hesitated. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "I feel like a lot is expected of me," I said finally. My mother's smile faltered. "Of course it is. Your family." "That's exactly the point," Dr. Harris said. My father leaned back, crossing his arms. "We've already discussed this as a family." "Yes," Dr. Harris said, "but this decision belongs to Emily." Sophie's head snapped up. She looked at me then, really looked at me, her eyes glossy. "You'd do this for me," she said softly. Not a question, a reminder. The words pressed into my chest like weight. I looked down at the table, at the untouched water. I thought about the basement, the box, the missing signatures. "I need time," I said again. My father exhaled sharply. "Time is something we don't have." "Doctor," Harris's voice stayed level. "Time is something Emily is entitled to." My mother stood up abruptly. "This is becoming unnecessary," she said. "We came here to help our daughter." "You are," he said, "by allowing this process to unfold properly." She stared at him for a moment, then sat back down, stiff. The meeting ended shortly after. No decisions, no signatures, just unresolved tension hanging in the air. In the hallway outside, my mother grabbed my arm. "You embarrassed us in there," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to," I replied. "You don't seem to understand what's at stake," she said. "This isn't about you." I looked at her hand on my arm. The grip was firm, familiar. "I think it is," I said. She released me as if I'd shocked her. Sophie stood a few steps away, watching. Her face was unreadable. That night, back home, the house felt different. Not hostile, just conditional. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. My father didn't look at me. My mother spoke only when necessary. Later, as I headed downstairs, Sophie followed me. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded. We stood at the bottom of the stairs, the hum of the pipes filling the space between us. "You don't have to be scared," she said. "Mom and Dad just want things to go back to normal." Normal? I looked at her and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Normal had always worked for her. "I'll think about it," I said. She smiled, relieved. "I knew you would." As she went back upstairs, I stayed where I was, listening to her footsteps fade. For the first time, the expectation felt visible, tangible. Like a contract I'd never signed but was being held to anyway. And I knew, with a clarity that scared me, that thinking wasn't what they were afraid of. They were afraid of what would happen if I finally decided. Sophie knocked on the basement door that night, even though it was never locked. The sound startled me anyway. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded and sat up on the bed. The basement light cast soft shadows on the walls, stretching them into shapes that made the room feel smaller than it already was. She stepped inside slowly, like she was entering unfamiliar territory. She didn't sit right away, just stood there, twisting the sleeve of her cardigan between her fingers. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. It was the most honest answer I had. She smiled faintly. "You'll be fine. You always are." There it was again, not reassurance, expectation. She finally sat on the edge of the old desk chair, facing me. Up close, she looked more tired than I remembered. Dark circles under her eyes, skin too pale. "I didn't want things to get weird today," she said. "At the hospital." "They already are," I replied. She looked down at her hands. "Mom's just stressed. Dad, too. This whole thing's a lot." "For you," I said. She glanced up quickly, then back down. "For all of us." The words sounded practiced, like something she'd heard enough times to make her own. There was a long pause. The pipes hummed above us, steady and indifferent. "Did you know?" I asked. She froze. "Know what?" "About me," I said. "About whatever this is." Her shoulders tensed, just for a moment, but it was enough. She exhaled slowly. "I knew there were things you didn't know," she said carefully. My chest tightened. "How long?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Since I was 17. The room seemed to tilt. 17, I repeated. She nodded. "I overheard them talking one night. After one of my appointments, they didn't realize I was awake. I felt numb, and you never said anything." "I didn't know what to say," she replied quickly. "I didn't even understand it fully. They just kept saying you were different. Different. They said you were strong," she continued, "that you'd always take care of things, that if anything ever happened to me, you'd step up." I stared at her. "And that didn't bother you?" Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "I didn't choose to be sick." "I know," I said. "But I didn't choose to be responsible for you either," she snapped, then immediately looked ashamed. "I mean, you didn't choose," I finished. "You just accepted it." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. They made it sound like that was just how families work. I let out a shaky breath. "Did you ever think about me?" She looked up, hurt flashing across her face. "Of course I did." "Did you ever think about what it would cost me?" I asked. She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. "I was always told you'd be okay," she said finally, "that you could handle anything." I laughed softly. "That's not the same as being okay." She looked around the basement then, like she was seeing it for the first time. The low ceiling, the narrow window, the boxes stacked against the wall. "I didn't realize it was this bad down here," she said. "It's not bad," I replied. "It's just not upstairs." She winced. "I'm scared," she admitted. "If you don't do this, I don't know what happens to me." I looked at her, really looked, at the fear, the need, the way her illness had shaped everything around her, including me. "I'm scared too," I said. She reached for my hand. I let her hold it, but the contact felt different now, less grounding, more complicated. "You won't let me die," she said quietly. The words landed like a weight on my chest. I pulled my hand back. "I don't know if I can be the reason you live," I said. "Not like this." She stared at me, shocked. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know who I am outside of what you need," I replied. "And I don't know how to give you something I never agreed to give." Her face crumpled. "That's not fair." "No," I said, "it's not." She stood up abruptly. "So what, you're just going to walk away?" I shook my head. "I don't know yet." "That's not an answer," she said. "It's the only one I have," I replied. She hesitated, then turned toward the stairs. At the bottom step, she stopped. "They always said you'd never leave," she said without looking back. The words stayed with me long after her footsteps faded upstairs. Later that night, I opened the box again. This time, I didn't stop myself. I read every page. Temporary placement, guardianship, Court dates I didn't remember, names I'd never seen before. One line underlined in fading ink made my breath catch. Child referred to as Anna in initial intake. Anna. I closed the box and sat there in the dark, the name echoing in my head. Upstairs, the house settled into silence. No coughing, no murmured reassurances, just the steady hum of pipes and electricity. For the first time, I didn't feel strong. I felt awake. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that whatever came next would change everything. Not just for Sophie, for me, for... The word no followed me for the next 24 hours, even though I never said it out loud. It sat in my chest, heavy and unmoving, like something my body recognized before my mouth did. My mother started early the next morning. She knocked on the basement door before I was fully awake. "We need to talk," she said. I pulled on a sweater and followed her upstairs. The kitchen was spotless. Too spotless. She'd cleaned it the way she did before guests came over, or before bad news was delivered gently. She poured coffee for both of us, though I hadn't asked for any. "You scared your sister last night," she said, setting the mug down in front of me. "I didn't mean to," I replied. "But you did," she said calmly. She barely slept. I wrapped my hands around the mug without drinking. I didn't lie to her. My mother sighed like I was a child being difficult on purpose. "This is a lot for everyone," she said. "And right now, Sophie doesn't need uncertainty. She needs stability." I looked at her. "What about me?" She hesitated, just long enough to answer without answering. "You've always been stable," she said. "That's one of your strengths." Later that afternoon, my father called me into the living room. He sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. "If this goes wrong," he said without preamble, "there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I asked. He didn't meet my eyes. "Financial ones. Housing, insurance, things you rely on." It wasn't a threat. It was an explanation. By evening, the messages started coming in. Relatives, church friends, people I barely spoke to anymore. "We're praying for Sophie. This is such a test of faith. Family has to stick together in times like this." No one mentioned my name. I sat alone in the basement, my phone lighting up again and again, each vibration tightening the knot in my chest. Around midnight, my phone rang. Hospital number. "Emily," a man said gently. "This is James. I'm part of the donor advocacy team." He didn't rush, didn't pressure. "I just want you to know," he said, "that whatever decision you make, it's yours. And we can support you through it." Something in his voice broke through everything else. "Am I doing something wrong?" I asked quietly. "No," he said without hesitation. "You're doing something honest." When the call ended, the house felt unbearably silent. I packed a small bag, not to leave forever, just to breathe. Before I went upstairs, I paused at the filing cabinet one last time. The box was lighter now, its secrets already carried inside me. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "I need time. Please don't follow me." I didn't know if they would listen. Outside, the air was cool and damp. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. I walked until the house disappeared behind me. At a bus stop a few blocks away, I sat down and finally let myself say it. No. It didn't echo. It didn't shatter anything. It just existed. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The bus stop was empty, except for me and a flickering streetlight that buzzed like it was about to give up. I sat on the cold bench, my bag at my feet, my hands tucked into my sleeves. For the first time in years, no one knew exactly where I was. That realization should have scared me. Instead, it felt strangely quiet inside my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I watched cars pass, one by one, each driver heading somewhere that wasn't my problem. When the first bus came, I let it go. Then the next. I wasn't ready to move yet. I just needed to exist somewhere that didn't belong to anyone else. My phone buzzed just before dawn. A missed call from my mother. 2 from my father. A message from Sophie. Please come home." I didn't respond. Later that morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was the hospital. "Emily?" a woman said gently. "I wanted to let you know there's been a development." I braced myself. "We've identified another potential donor for Sophie," she continued. "The evaluation is moving forward." I closed my eyes. "Oh," I said. There was a pause. "We also wanted to confirm that you're officially withdrawing from the donor process." "Yes," I replied. The word felt steadier this time. "I am." "Okay," she said. "That's been documented. You don't need to do anything else." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, letting the relief and guilt crash into each other without deciding which one I was allowed to feel. A few days later, I received an email from Dr. Harris. He explained that, due to the medical discrepancies uncovered during evaluation, certain early records had been reviewed with legal authorization. He attached a secure file. I opened it in a public library, my hands trembling as I scrolled. There it was, a different last name, a different beginning. The documents were clinical, detached, but one line stood out. Child referred to as Anna Reed during initial intake. "Anna," I whispered it out loud, tasting the sound of it. It didn't feel foreign, it felt unfinished. The file explained things without emotion: temporary placement, guardianship that became permanent, a decision made when I was too young to remember. No conspiracy, no villain, just choices and silence. I walked out of the library into the afternoon light, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time, like someone who'd finally been handed their own weight to carry. I didn't go back to the house. I found a small room to rent across town. Nothing special. A bed, a desk, a window that faced the street. It was enough. Sophie's surgery happened a few weeks later. I heard about it through a distant relative. The donor was approved. The transplant went well. I was glad she lived. I was glad I didn't have to disappear for it. My mother sent one last message: "You didn't have to do this." I stared at it for a long time before replying. I did. I started introducing myself differently after that. Not right away, not dramatically, just quietly when it mattered. "My name is Anna." No explanations, no apologies. Some nights I still thought about the basement, the box, the girl who learned how to be strong before she learned how to be safe. I didn't hate her. I thanked her. She got me here. I wasn't born to save a family that never chose me. I was born to choose myself. And for the first time, that choice felt real. I didn't lose a family. I stepped out of a role I was never meant to play. Love that only exists when you sacrifice isn't love. It's leverage. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me honest. And for the first time in my life, the future belongs to me, not to what I was expected to give up.